Hello my crafty friends, this is Monica from Allsewpetite. Welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial I will demonstrate how to make the lunch bag. This is a free pattern on my website and it is suitable for advanced beginner. This is quite a large lunch bag, so you can fit quite a lot of food, breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever you need to keep you going during the day. It features handles on both sides, so you can carry it with ease. Then on the front, we have a flap with a zipper closure around. So when you open it, you insert the main compartment. As you can see, the compartment is quite large. You can fit a lot of food in here. There is also an accent panel here. I used an accent fabric for this one. You don't have to. You can use the same fabric as for the rest of the body. I wanted to add some accents, so I used the same fabric on my handles as well. So I have two-tone handle. And the main compartment is fully lined. There is no raw edges and no binding, which gives you a nice clean finish. I would recommend using waterproof canvas, so you can easily clean it if something is spilled. If you watched my previous video, you know that this lunch bag was made as part of the Halloween sewing challenge organized by modesforyou.com. This is where I got this beautiful fabric from as well. So in case if you're wondering where I got it, I'm going to include the links to this fabric and all the other supplies I used in this tutorial in the description box below. Alright, if you want to find out how to make this lunch bag, then keep on watching. To complete today's project, you will need some external and lining fabric. I'm going to mix two different fabrics for my external panels. Mainly, I'm going to use this quilting cotton, kindly gifted to me by modesforyou.com. And then as an accent, I'm going to use this faux leather. For my lining, I'm using a waterproof canvas today. So in case if I spill something or if it's dirty, I can just wipe it with a wet cloth and then I don't have to worry about it. If like me you are working with a quilting cotton today, I would recommend interfacing the back of the fabric with some woven interfacing. I already done that. I prefer to interface the entire panel and then cut my pattern pieces. I found it's much easier. I don't really have to worry about fitting the two pieces together to fit perfectly. To stabilize your lunch bag, you can either use some foam stabilizers, just like this one. This is a high loft sew-in stabilizer, or some fusible fleece, Decovil light, or anything you have on hand. It really depends on what sort of fabric you're using, or if you prefer your lunch bag to be more or less structured. Also, you might want to consider using some thermal fleece, especially if you're going to carry hot or cold meals or drinks inside, and you want the temperature to last longer. For today's project, I decided to quilt my external pieces to give the fabric just a little bit more structure and body. I have applied some fusible fleece. This is a very lightweight fusible fleece. And then I'm going to also add my thermal fleece to the bag, so I can carry hot or cold food to work and I don't have to worry about the temperature that much. You will also need number 5 zipper for the main closure. The measurement is provided in the sewing instructions. Your favorite marking tools, a ruler to take some measurements, double-sided tape might be useful today. Also an owl and a hump jumper to help you out with those bulky seams, pins and clips to hold your fabric in place, some scissors and snips. A seam ripper is always good to have on hand if something goes wrong, and we'll also need thread and hand needle and a thimble to finish off the lining. To complete the lunch bag, you would need to cut 4 handles. If you're making accent handles, two-tone type of handles, then cut 2 pieces from one fabric and then the remaining 2 pieces from your accent fabric. You will need to cut one front from your external and lining fabric, one back from your external and lining fabric, one base panel from your external and lining fabric, 2 side panels from external and lining fabric, and 1 top piece from external and lining fabric. Before I start working on the project, I need to add the thermal fleece to the back of my external panels. To do that, I'm going to flip the panels to the wrong side and then place the thermal fleece on top, so it's on the wrong side of the fabric. I know some of the heat-resistant fabric or thermal fleece, they have right and wrong side, so you would have more metallic side on one side and then more kind of a fleece side on the other side. However, mine is exactly the same on both sides, so I don't really have to worry about it. If you are using thermal fleece that has the right and wrong side, then you need to remember to insert the more metallic side towards the heat, because it will bounce the heat back to its source. So let's say I'm using that thermal fleece on my lunch bag today. I will need to make sure that the shiny metal side faces the lining. So let's say this one is the shiny side and this would be a plain fleece. So I will have to put it the way that the fleece faces my external fabric and then the shiny metallic side will face my lining fabric. So if my food is inside my bag, obviously the food will first face the lining piece. So if the food is hot inside my lunch bag, I want to keep the temperature of the food hot as long as possible. I want the heat to bounce back to the inside of my lunch bag. So that's why you need to make sure the shiny side of your thermal fleece is facing the lining. If, for example, you are using the thermal fleece on oven gloves, then you would do it in the opposite direction. So if you have a glove, obviously you don't want to get burned. So the shiny metallic side of the thermal fleece would have to face outward, away from your hand. So away from the lining of your oven glove. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, let's move on. So I have my thermal fleece cut out to the size of my pattern piece. Then I'm going to line it up on the wrong side and just pin it around. Once I have this pinned down, I'm going to stitch around all sides, basting that thermal fleece to my external panels. I'm going to use about 2 to 5 millimeter seam allowance to do that. And then you're going to repeat the same process on all external pieces, so you have all the thermal fleece basted to your panels. Okay, I have all my external pieces backed with the thermal fleece. So now I can start to assemble my lunch bag. But before I do, I want to make sure I marked midpoints on all my pieces. The easiest way to do it is to fold your fabric in half and then make a little snippets just like that. So then I know this is the middle point of the bottom edge of my back piece. So I'll do that on top as well. Just like that. As you can see, there is a little triangle notch here. And then I'm going to repeat that on all my lining and external pieces. If, like me, you are making two-tone handles, you will have to draw a line in the center, then fold those two edges towards the center. I already have that done on this side, and then you can press it with an iron. If you are using faux leather, cork or vinyl or something similar that you cannot press, you can still draw a line in the center and then apply double-sided tape on each side of your handle. Then you can peel the plastic cover and then fold the edges towards the line, just like I have done here. To make the bottom handle wider, I marked my center line, then I did about 2 to 3 millimeters line on each side. So when I fold my edges towards those lines, I have a gap in between, which means my handle will be wider. Now that we have all 4 handles ready, we're going to assemble them together. So you take one of your bottom handle and one of your top handle, and with wrong sides together, which means the sides that are folded, the raw edges, you're going to place them on top of each other, and you're going to center the top handle so you have the same amount of bottom handle showing on each side. And then we can pin that in place. When you have the first handle ready, you're going to repeat that on the other handle. And then we're going to take this to the machine and we're going to stitch on both sides of the handle. Stitch with the top handle facing up so you see what you're doing. And then you're going to stitch along that edge, the folded edge of the top handle, because it is narrower. If you stitch only on top of the accent, you will not catch the fabric together, so you're going to have to make another row of stitch later on. So to do only single stitch on each side, you need to make sure you sew close to the edge of the top handle. When you have your handles ready, put them aside for a second. Then you're going to take your side panels, ruler and a pen, and mark 5 centimeters from each short end. So we're going to make a little notch, mark 5 centimeters on this side. Then we're going to repeat that on this panel. There you go, just like that. This way we know exactly where to position our handles. So now you can take one of your handles and we're going to place them on top of the side panels. You need to make sure that the bottom side of your handle is facing up. So you're going to position the finished edge of your handle at that marking. So this is the 5 centimeter notch. So I'm going to position that and then we're going to line up those raw edges. You can clip that in place. And then make sure your handle is not twisted. You put the other short end against the other notch. Just like that. Now we're going to take this to the machine and we're going to baste the handles about 5 millimeters from the edge on all 4 sides. After you've basted the handles, you're going to take the top panel, place it facing up, so the right side is up, and then place the side panels on top and line them up on along those short edges. Just make sure that the side where the handle is attached is at the side. So you don't want to stitch your panel like this with the handle hanging like this. You need to line up exactly the same side where the handle is basted. So you're going to line it up on both sides and then we can clip that in place. When you are ready, you're going to stitch both seams using 1 centimeter seam allowance. Okay, now that we have both sides stitched down, we're going to open the panels. You can press the seam allowance towards the side panel. So if you flip it over, the seam allowance needs to be pointed towards the smaller, narrower side. And then we're going to top stitch along that finished edge. If you are using foam stabilizer and you have quite a lot of bulk at the seams, you can trim it off. Okay, we have this panel completely finished. Now we're going to repeat the steps on the lining side. With right side facing together, you're going to place the side panels and line them up on top of the top panel. Just the same way we've done for the external pieces. We're going to clip them in place and then we're going to stitch along both sides using 1 centimeter seam allowance. Now again we're going to open the panels, but this time we're going to press the seam allowance towards the top panel. So we're going to press the seam allowance going inwards. And then we can top stitch along the seam, but again, because we are pressing the seam allowance towards the main top panel, you're going to top stitch along that top panel instead. Okay, now we're going to work on the front and the zipper closure. Take your zipper and find the midpoints. Just mark it with your pen. Then you're going to take your external front and we're going to place the zipper on top and we're going to line it up along that curved top edge. We're going to ignore the bottom edge for now. So you're going to place the zipper facing down, line up that midpoint on the zipper with the midpoint on the top of the front panel and clip that in place. And then you can line up the edge of the zipper along that edge of the front panel on both sides. You might have to snip the zipper when you get to the curve, so it is easier for you to line it up, because at the moment it's going to be, you're going to have to force it to, if you want to line it up perfectly around that curved corner. I like to snip a little bit into the zipper. This way the zipper is more flexible and I can line it up around that edge with more ease. And then I just continue till I get to the bottom. When you have this ready, we're going to baste the zipper around all those 3 sides using 5mm seam allowance. Okay, I have my zipper basted to my front panel. Now I'm going to take the front lining piece and place it on top. So the right side are facing each other. You're going to place it on top, sandwiching the zipper between the pieces. And then we're going to pin that lining to the external panel. And then we're going to sew the seam using 1 centimeter seam allowance. It might be easier if we open the zipper beforehand. If you are using continuous zipper like me, you can just take it completely out and separate the tape into 2. If you have ready-made zipper, you can just open it as much as you can, then place the lining on top, clip and sew the seam. Because I'm using continuous zipper, I'm just going to separate those tapes and then insert the pull later on. So I'm going to line up the lining on top, clip it around all sides. When you do that, make sure you keep the tape out of the seam allowance, especially around the corners. The zipper teeth or the coil of the zipper tend to push towards your seam allowance. So when you place your lining on top, make sure you fold and push the zipper out of the way so you don't sew over the zipper teeth. Now I'm going to stitch around using 1 centimeter seam allowance. You want to double check if you don't have any pleats on your zipper. I like to just double check around my corners especially. You can even turn that right side out just to double check if everything looks good. If you are happy with it, you can trim the seam allowance around the corners so it's nice and flat when you turn it. If you have a pinking shears, you can just trim the seam allowance by half around the corners using your pinking shears. Just like that. Otherwise, using just the regular scissors, you can cut little triangles out. When you're happy with everything, you're going to turn the panel right side out. You can press the front flap with an iron just to make sure your seam is nice and flat. And then we're going to top stitch along the zipper and then baste the bottom edge. This is the front of my lunch bag and this would be my bag. So you need to attach the zipper to the front of your bag. So you're going to take your zipper tape and again facing down, place it on top of that panel. You can mark those midpoints and clip that in place. Now that I have my zipper clipped, I'm going to baste it using 5mm seam allowance and then we're going to attach the lining. We can take that lining piece and with right side facing down, so the right side is facing the external fabric, you're going to line it up on top. Make sure your handles are out of the way. Match your midpoints. And then you're going to pin it along. Okay, we're going to sew the seam using 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once we have that seam stitched, you're going to open the panel and place them wrong sides together, and then you can press the seam flat. I like to do that in 2 stages. So I first open my panels. I will press the seam allowance towards one side. So at the moment my seam allowance is facing towards the lining, but that doesn't really matter. I just don't want to iron on top of my faux leather. I would press quickly that on one side. And then I can bring them wrong sides together. Line it up. And press it flat. Okay, so now when you are ready, you can top stitch along that zipper, and then we can baste around the remaining edges. So just keep the handles out of the way. Make sure you line up your lining and external panels nicely. You can clip them around if you need to. And then we're going to baste stitch about 5 millimeters from the edge. Now we can take the external back panel and we're going to align it along the other side with right sides together. Again, it might be easier if we just snip the fabric around the curved corners, so it is easier for us to line it up. So now that you have this pinned down, we're going to baste the back panel using 5 millimeter seam allowance, and then we're going to do the same thing for the lining side. We have basted the external back panel. Now we're going to take the lining back panel, and with right side facing each other, we're going to sandwich the entire lunge bag between the external and the lining back pieces, so we can line them up. It might be a little bit difficult, especially if you used a lot of stabilizer like me. You're just gonna have to squash everything and then place the lining right side down, so the right side is facing the right side of the lining side, and then we're going to pin that in place. You are pinning it to exactly the same seam that you just stitched. So you need to maneuver the fabric out of the way, take your time. I have a lot of fleece and stabilizer today, so that's a lot of bulk. But if you didn't use as much as me, it will be much easier for you to pin that. The most difficult part is just those corners here, because you obviously don't want any pleats. So we're going to have to go extremely slowly. When you are ready, you're going to stitch that seam using 1 centimeter seam allowance. I've stitched my seam and I turned it right side out of the camera to see if my corners have no pleats and if everything looks okay. It is fine for me. In case if something is not right for you, if you've got a little pleats or something, just unpick your seam a little bit and fix it if you have to. Otherwise, if you're happy with everything, we're going to trim the seam allowance by half. Now that we removed the bulk of the seam allowance, we can turn everything right side out. Okay, I've turned everything. My corners look nice and round. There's no puckering or anything. So I'm going to line up the bottom edge, my external and my lining pieces, and then we're going to baste them together. Alright, so our lunch bag is starting to take its shape. We have our back, the main panel and the front. So if you haven't done so already, you're going to insert the zipper pull and we can close the zipper. So I'm going to do that right now. Alright, just like that. The last thing to do is now to attach the base panels. So before I do that, I'm going to tack my zippers on each side and then I can trim the zippers. So now I'm going to turn the lunch bag wrong side out, put the handles inside, out of the way, so I don't stitch them through. Take your external base and with right side facing inside the lunch bag, you're going to place it on top. You're going to match the midpoints and then we're going to clip everything around. Here we go, just like that. We're going to stitch all sides using 1 centimeter seam allowance. When you have your external base panel stitched, you're going to trim the seam allowance by half. The last thing to do is to attach the lining base panel. So there is 2 ways you can do it. If you can squash your lunch bag, you could do it in the same way you've done the back panel. So you could place it, you could squash your lunch bag, place it on top, and then line up on all 4 sides, leaving one side open so you could turn it to the right side. However, I cannot do it because my lunch bag is too bulky and too stiff. So I'm going to follow the sewing instructions. So now I'm going to fold all 4 sides by 1 centimeter. I pressed 1 centimeter fold towards the wrong side on all 4 sides. Now I can put the base panel on top of my lunch bag. So this is the wrong side and this is the wrong side. So I'm going to place it on top. You need to fold the seam allowance towards inside of your bag, so you want to hide them obviously. So what I like to do, I like to just pinch roughly my edges like this, so it is easier for me to stitch the lining panel, especially because I have used a lot of fusible fleece and thermal fleece today, so there is a lot of bulk. It is a little bit more difficult, but if you are patient, you can do it. Yeah, just like that. Now I can take my lining and I'm going to line it up and I'm going to pin it so I can hold everything together. It might be a little bit more difficult at the corners, so you're going to have to trim the bulk as much as possible so you can cover it. So I'm going to do all that around, and then I'm going to attach the lining to the lunch bag by hand using a ladder stitch. Once you have your lining base attached, then you can turn your lunch bag right side out, make your corners neat, and if you have to, just give it a finer press. Congratulations, you finished your lunch bag. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you would like to see more videos like this one, make sure you subscribe to my channel. I would love to see your creations, so make sure you join my Facebook group and show me what you've made. That is all for today. I hope to see you in the next video. Stay crafty, friends. Bye!